It's just junk. But if it's just a valve or just a piston or just a valve and a piston, then it's usually worth fixing. Because a bike like this in good condition, like the one behind me, is a $2,500, $2,700 bike. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take everything apart today. My other rule of thumb on projects like this is I'll get in there, I'll take everything apart before I spend $1 ordering anything. So you want to make sure you have a good understanding of everything that's broken before you start spending money. So I already got the gas tank off and the seat off and whatever. There's no reason to show you guys how to do that. Just some bolts come right off. But the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get in there. We're going to take the head off so we can have a good understanding of what's going on in the cylinder. First thing we do is we pull the drain plug, and as you can see, it's about 50% oil, 50% coolant, which immediately tells me that at the very minimum the head gasket is gone, but most likely that the head is cracked and damaged and we won't be able to salvage this. But until we get in there, we won't really know for sure. There's also a little weep hole here that you want to take out and let everything drain. We're just letting everything drain slowly. I went ahead and took out, there's just 3 12mm bolts on each side that hold the head to the frame right here. You can see that this bike's been laid down a couple times. Now we just kind of got to go and start removing stuff off of the head and basically allow us to get these head bolts out of here. We've gotten all the coolant out of the motor, got the valve cover off, just 2 10mm bolts on top. And there's our Unicam assembly. You got the exhaust valves right here, the intakes are down in the middle, and it's definitely hitting something. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull off this timing chain tensioner, and all you got to do is undo the tensioner and then take off these 8mm bolts, and the whole assembly just pulls out. With that out of the way, you should be able to remove these 10mm bolts that hold the cam in, and then remove the cam. One good trick is to put a little piece of welding wire around this and hang it out. That way you never have to worry about losing the chain down through the head. Remove the cam holders. You can see there's a little bit of scarring in here, not too bad. And these retainer clips, make sure you don't lose these retainer clips. Also, these are labeled, and then the 2 shorter bolts go towards the intake side. So here's a cam, and this is what we like to see. There's a few marks here, but the intake lobes look completely brand new, like they've barely even been broken in. The exhaust lobe has a little bit of wear on it, but nothing too significant. I don't see anything that even resembles a flat spot or a heat mark or anything. And the bearings look to be in good shape. So I would say this cam is in good shape, so we can just put it right here. At this point, we have to unhook the intake throttle body thing, because normally it's a carburetor, but not here. And then we should be able to remove these safety bolts and remove the main head bolts and pull off the head. The nice thing about dirt bikes is, while they are expensive to rebuild, they are designed to be rebuilt, especially a race bike like this. You just blow them up, that's just part of the business. And so they're not too hard to take apart. Here are head bolts. I labeled them. Now, these head bolts are usually stretch bolts and you never want to reuse them, but it's nice to be able to go back and measure them to double check what you're ordering. A lot of times the rears will be different from the fronts. Now, with that removed, we should be able to just take a small mallet and get the head busted loose, pop it out of the intake, and take it out the side of the frame. Well, sometimes bikes aren't over-revved. Sometimes they're just owned by dipshit motherfuckers. Take a look at this. This right here is a little Phillips head bit. And do you know where I found this? Inside the combustion chamber. This piston is gouged to fuck. Now, the funny thing is I don't see any scarring on the walls, so I think this piston could potentially even be reusable. You could probably run for quite a while with this. I wouldn't, but you probably could in a pinch. We're going to take the jug off in a minute so that we can inspect the rings and everything else. And then if I take you back over here to the cylinder head, this is the bad news. As far as I can tell, I think 3 out of 4 valves are damaged, and there is a little bit of damage to the head itself in the combustion chamber, but nothing that can't really be sanded or smoothed out. I think all of the critical stuff is okay. Obviously, I'm going to have to clean it up. It was going to need all 4 new valves, but 4 new valves or 4 used valves online, you know, might be, I don't know, $150 for new valves rather than, you know, $700 for a new head. So I think this is actually going to be rebuildable, but I need to take this apart, clean it up a little bit, and take a closer look at everything. Took all the valves out. All 4 valves were bent. I found, where was it? Right in there, you can see that right there looks like a crack, maybe. But more importantly, if you look right in here, you can see this intake seat survived. But this was the intake valve that was really bent, and it cracked right there, and that's the problem. Oil is going to come into the cylinder from there, and coolant probably came in through this cracked jacket, and that's what's going to fuck us right there. Because if this seat was okay, everything else I could kind of clean up and polish up and whatnot, but that right there means we need a new head casting, and those are expensive, so I need to go and do some more online research. Alright, well, we finally got some more parts in. So recap: piston is off, engine is at top dead center. We can begin reassembly. So let's take a look at what we got over here. I got a Wiseco race piston kit. I already put the rings on it. Comes beautiful machine looking little piston. And so the deal with this is when you put the rings on in the right order. You can see the top scraper ring is marked with a little N. That lets you know that that's the up face. The little oiling rings aren't marked, they're, at least on this engine, they're not directional. So then you want to make sure you offset the slit in the rings by 90 degrees. So this one goes here, the top oiling ring goes here, the scraper ring goes here, and then the second oiling ring is here. So basically there's never a clear way through. Comes with a brand new wrist pin and a few new circlips, as well as we got our new gaskets. This is a new jug gasket, new head gasket, new head bolts. This is for the timing chain tensioner. I cleaned up the jug, and you can see where it failed right here in black. There's actually a crack that runs all the way through here to the water jacket, and that is why our oil was full of coolant and vice versa. Then I'll take you guys over here. Bought this off of eBay, cleaned it up. This is just a nice new jug. Looks to be in pretty decent shape. All I did was I used a little bit of ATF, a power drill, and some honing stones, and went through and honed the cylinder. And so now you can see it's got a nice little crosshatch pattern going. It's pretty clean. It's going to work out just fine. So first things first, we need to put in our new piston. So there's our new piston in. A couple of tips and tricks. First of all, when you're putting the circlip in, you're going to drop the circlip at least 3 or 4 times. If you don't put this towel in, you can ruin your engine because you drop the circlip in there and never get it back. So, real quick. The other thing is this Wiseco high performance piston, it bounces back and forth like this. And I have never seen that design before, so I actually called up Wiseco earlier today and was like, hey, am I supposed to have some sort of spacers or something in here? And they said, no. Well, I mean, it makes sense because, right, you won't be worried about up and down, and there's no up and down play. But side-to-side play doesn't really come into effect because you've got the jug on. But it's just part of the design, and that's another tip. Part of the reason that I do business with companies like Wiseco is Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. You can call them. They will put you through to a tech guy. I didn't wait on hold at any point. Put you through to a tech guy who will look up the specs and answer all your questions, walk you through all of the measurements. If you have any installation questions, they will help you with those as well. They're really, really good about it, and it really makes a huge difference, in my opinion, dealing with a company that can offer you that versus buying some cheap Chinese pistons or whatever and having no idea if the thing is right or not. Next step is our brand new jug gasket. It only goes one way, and you can tell which side is up because this hole is off center. So after this, we can slip our jug on. And the trick there is you want to pinch this top ring to help get it in there a little smoother. We're also going to put a little bit of oil inside of the jug to help the piston slip right in. Now that I have the jug on, I put the jug screw back in. You don't want to crank on this. It's very, very like low torque. But basically, that's just to keep the jug flat and in place. So good news, we finally got our head, and this guy did a phenomenal job packing everything up. Shipped me everything, including the old head bolts for reference, as well as came all assembled. A really clean head. Looks like somebody's done a little bit of hand porting here on the intake. But this head is in really good shape. There's a little bit of wear here, but nothing that can really be felt too badly. It looks a lot worse than it is. But this head is super clean. Valve seats are nicely cut. Very, very happy with it. And it looks like this is the piston that he sent me. This is what ran in the head before. And this is a Wiseco high compression piston as well. So it's the same piston that we put into our engine, what's in here before. Now I'm going to go ahead and reuse the cam and all the valve train that came with this head. Because in my experience, it's best to reuse that stuff that's already mated. All the metal's already mated, but we are going to definitely use some Moly assembly lube to get it all together. So the next step is we can put down our head gasket, put in our new head bolts, that we bought because they're one-time use, and start torquing everything down. And from here, it's basically just a bit of a marathon to put everything back together. And hopefully it should all go back together pretty easily. The hardest thing is going to be locating the head and making sure it lines up with the intake. One thing to keep in mind is before you install the head gasket, you need to install this. This is your second timing chain tensioner. It actually slips in under there. Now that this is on, the next big step is going to be getting the head on there. It went on without too much fuss. We're still going to screw around with this little rubber bit and obviously a bunch of other stuff. But the head went on. These are all just finger tight right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to install these set screws, tighten them down a little bit, and then we're going to torque the head. And I'm not a big, like, you must torque everything to spec proponent, but head bolts are just one of those things that you absolutely positively have to torque to spec, otherwise you're just not going to have a real good time. So we got a little torque wrench here. I got the torque spec from the manual. We're going to set it, and when you're doing head bolts, I don't want to say every engine does this, but almost every engine I've ever worked on requires multiple steps. So our head bolts need to be 33 pound-feet total, and you want to do it in 2 or 3 steps at a minimum. So what we're going to do is we're going to torque every head bolt to 10 pounds, then we're going to torque every head bolt to 22 pounds, then we're going to torque every head bolt to 33 pounds, and then we will be done with that. Now that we've got the head bolts in, the next step is we got to install the valve train, which means we got to make sure our timing is set up, which means we got to come over to the other side here. And if you take a look in there, you can see there's a dot and an arrow, and when you're looking at them dead nuts on, they're lined up, and that's top dead center. So now we know the crank is set to top dead center, so we can set the cam to top dead center. And then while we're over here, we can just go ahead and this is probably like a water temperature sensor. Now to set timing in this engine, you have 2 little hash marks you can see right there. You want them to be lined up with this surface right here, so you can see we're perfectly lined up over here. And we're gonna now want to come back and just double check our crank sensors, or our crank lineup is still there. So now we can put in the cam retainer caps. And on this engine you have to be careful because the cam bearings are replaceable, so they slide back and forth. So you're gonna want to get this lined up exactly, and you also want to be very careful not to drop these things into the engine, because that would be bad. Now I'm using this stuff. This is Redline Assembly Lube. I've had this bottle for years and built countless engines with it. Stuff's great. It's basically just a moly lubricant. And you run it for a couple hours and then you change out the oil like you normally would, and it's like it was never there. But it helps with that first dry startup. There we go. Our cam lock retainers are in. You can see the cam has almost no play side to side. A little bit that's just in the bearings. It's totally normal. You can see our timing is still set here. We'll check on the other side. Our timing is still set. That's one thing I can't stress enough. Check your timing. Every step I do when I'm rebuilding a motor, after I've set the timing, I check it. So put the camera tuners on, check the timing. Put the spark plug in, check the timing. Because one tooth off on the timing, you trash a brand new engine. It's not worth it. It's an easy thing to do, and the more you learn to double check it, the more you learn to trust yourself and know that you're doing a good job. Now, at this point, let's see, what else we need to put in? We need to put, after this point, I think we can actually kickstart it over just by hand and make sure nothing binds and everything seems to work. Okay, so the timing chain tensioner is in. Basically, you want to untension it, put it in there, put the bolts down, and then release it, and it'll auto tension the chain. You can see it's quite taut, but still a little bit of give. So that's exactly what that's supposed to do. It can be kind of a pain in the butt to get in there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to adjust this and tighten the intake, and then put the cover on the valve.